From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
The General Assembly is back on Smith Hill, and while it may seem like the Passock Stadium proposal is taking all the oxygen out of the room, there's a lot more for lawmakers to consider, including a dreary budget outlook, the possibility of legalizing marijuana in sports betting, and what it all means now that we're in an election year. A political roundtable examines the 2018 legislative session this week on Newsmakers.
Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on this political roundtable from WPRI.com, we welcome reporter Ted Nesi, and also joining us, Executive Director of Common Cause Rhode Island, John Marion, and political reporter for Rhode Island Public Radio, Ian Donis. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Special thanks to John Marion. We had a last-minute cancellation on the program, and John, you dropped everything after the big storm and came right in, so we appreciate it.
Happy to be
here.
here.
How'd you guys do in the storm?
Not too bad. I mean, the roads seemed pretty good Friday morning, and we've dug out.
Good. Anyone lose power?
No, didn't. And it's I don't know what were the outages this morning, actually, because that was a big concern.
I didn't look. Yeah, it wasn't as bad. I know last night as they were sort of fearing, and that is the big concern going into a storm like this when it gets colder. That most people are warming up with Newsmakers on a Sunday morning. We're taping this on a Friday, and that's a big concern going into the weekend. So I'm glad you guys had power. That's good.
I mean, the politics of snow is a real thing. You just had the anniversary of the December debacle in December was 10 years after that. I mean, it can. I think anything that actually affects everyone is the most dangerous thing in politics because people understand the snow and they know firsthand what they think of it.
Yeah, I mean, you could just see the governor getting questions of why aren't you declaring a state of emergency and all that, and I think that's interesting. You are judged by your performance in the snowstorm, but Ian said his roads were clear, so I guess that's a good sign.
Look at Charlie Baker in Mass, just one last on that. I think the bedrock of his high approval ratings has been how he handled that horrible 2015 winter when the MBTA all but collapsed, which could have been been terrible for him, but it appears the voters in Massachusetts liked the way he handled it, felt he took responsibility and took steps, and he's been in the 60s and 70s ever since. Not the only factor, but I think if that had gone a different way, you wonder if he could have done what he's done.
It's a great point, Ted, and Governor Raimondo has obviously had some self-inflicted wounds with cooler and warmer and UHIP, so I think she deliberately took a very cautious approach to this storm and emphasized the need for people to have a backup plan if they did lose power. Fortunately, it appears that not many people did.
Yeah, and listen, check on your neighbors during this cold snap. You don't want to regret it if you don't. Let's all take care of each other when it's this cold. All right, we're supposed to talk about the General Assembly, so why don't we do that? At the top of the show, we said the Passock's proposal is really garnering the most attention. Do you think this will be the single most dominant issue this session, the Passock's?
I'd say early on, yes. Speaker Mattiello has been very consistent in being very skeptical about this, and at the same time, we don't know if Worcester is going to come up with an offer, and what that offer is. And is this a game of chicken playing out between Rhode Island and Worcester? But I think that will dominate some attention early on.
All Passock's all the time, John?
Yeah, especially depending on what the House does in terms of timing. So the Senate's going to do it next Tuesday. They're going to take it up in committee. I assume it'll be on the floor by Thursday. So the Senate's role may be done by next week. The House could drag it out till June, or the House could do it the week after. We don't know. And so it will dominate the debate as long as the House lets it dominate the debate.
It's funny, my test is always what people ask me about, who I just see out and about. I know you and I always do that, Tim. And last night as I was shoveling, my neighbor, who's a sports guy, turned to me and said, I got to ask you, Ted, what do you think is going to happen with the Passock's? And I told him the truth, which is I have no idea. I'm really, I'm always a little wary of predictions, but this one is hard to handicap. I think it's very clear it's going to get through the Senate in the coming weeks. But Speaker Mattiello, Ian and I were there with some of the other State House reporters. We talked to him at length about it on the first day of session. And, it comes down to the fact the Speaker fundamentally does not believe there's widespread public support for this. And
what's his testing on that?
What he hears out in the world, he says, when talking to his barber, he mentioned at the supermarket, at diners, and he emphasized to us he thinks he's as much as there's a lot of focus on him as the Speaker, he says he doesn't hear much different from the other rank and file members members of the House of Representatives that many of them say they're also getting a lot of negative feedback about it.
So are the people in the other chamber talking to different members of the public?
I think the Senate takes the view that this is something that's good for Rhode Island in the long run, and that people will be happy about it in the long run. Not the first time we've seen that divide during this period. If you think back to the truck tolls debate, the Senate passed that within a month of the announcement of it, saying, yes, there's concerns, but they'll be good for Rhode Island, etc. The House, under Speaker Mattiello, said, concerns, not sure, we're not passing that yet. And it was a long time before the version the House wanted came out. So I just really don't know where the House and Speaker Mattiello will end up.
The number 2 official in the House, Majority Leader Joseph Shekarchi, told me last summer that he thought the Paw Sox ownership had to be more like Twin River in advocating for their own proposal. And Twin River seemed very kind of subdued in pursuing their Tiverton casino. It ultimately did win public support, but they did have a really elaborate plan to win public support for it. And I think it's noteworthy that the Paw Sox, they have made some efforts, but in the view of critics and perhaps even people like Speaker Mattiello, they haven't done enough to sell the idea that the public is behind it.
Well, one of their efforts was dropping a bunch of mailers in Mattiello's district, right, in Cranston, and trying to sway public opinion that way based on the people that the Speaker's talking to. It apparently didn't work. What is the path to success for the Paw Sox right now? They've got the Senate. There's obviously, if the Speaker's not in on it, it isn't going to happen. Is it too late for them if they haven't figured it out already, or is there a path to success?
I do think if Worcester comes up with a proposal and it looks like they're on the cusp of leaving, they may be able to rally some sort of public support behind the idea of we don't want to be a state without a minor league team. So yeah, I think they're a credible threat out there, which who knows if Worcester is going to be able to pull it off. Could rally public opinion around it.
And the Paw Sox themselves, the Paw Sox in the end is a for-profit business with some very smart businessmen, Paul Salem, Terry Murray, Tom Ryan among the ownership group. They know internally what they think, how they think the team will do in Worcester, how they think the team will do here with this stadium, where they have wiggle room in the deal, etc., what their actual red lines are. I mean, one of their problems, I think, is that in 2015, under the late Jim Skeffington, they said, if you don't give us the Providence Stadium, the old proposal, we're leaving. Well, they didn't leave, right? And so I think there's a bluff calling element here. The situation is just very, very messy.
Yeah, I agree with John's point. I mean, I think in the absence of a specific offer from Worcester, this could play out longer rather than shorter for the reasons that you're saying, Ted.
I'm always interested in what the talks are behind the scenes, particularly between the Senate President and the House Speaker. We know the Senate President supports the Paw Sox Stadium. That's very clear. But how much? Is it the top priority for the Senate President? Do we have a sense yet as to how high it is for him, where he's going to have those meetings with the House Speaker and really push it?
Well, I'd say part of the reason why we are where we are is because there's been no single big cheerleader for this Paw Sox proposal. Governor Raimondo says she supports it, but she has not been a cheerleader for it. Dominic Ruggiero says he supports it, but he has not been a cheerleader for it. Other than Pawtucket Mayor Don Grebian, no one in elective office has really taken the ball and run with it, and I think that's kind of why this issue has gone sideways a little bit, and there is a degree of antipathy on the part of the public owing to the hangover of 38 Studios, the failed Providence proposal, but I think this project has lacked a visible public champion.
And Pawtucket, don't forget, it doesn't have a lot of power right now in the Assembly if you look at who has leadership roles, which does make a difference. This in the House, the Speaker is from Cranston.
In the House, because they have Conley, East Providence, Pawtucket.
And he's probably their strongest, most vocal. But he's a new Senate Finance Committee chairman, and there's no counterpart on the House side who has the visibility that Chairman Conley does. If you think back to when the last big McCoy deal got done in the 1990s, you had a Governor, Lincoln Almond, who was born in Central Falls, had connections up there. Speaker Harwood is from that area. Tony Pyrus, I believe, was the House Finance Committee. You had a lot of people in powerful roles who cared about delivering for Pawtucket. I think if you had a House Speaker from Pawtucket, it's hard for me to imagine this wouldn't have passed already, right? And that's just the way the world works.
All right, so it'll be Paw Sox definitely the first half. It'll be budget the second half. Supplemental budget will probably pop up prior to that, but there's a looming deficit lawmakers and the governor have to deal with. Is the Speaker's beloved car tax phase-out plan in jeopardy?
Yeah, I don't
ahead, John.
think so, just because, the speaker's the most powerful person in the state, and he has doubled down on the idea that he is going to make this happen, and this will be his legacy. And he said he's going to run for re-election, and if he's going to face the voters in District 15 again, he's got to make good on that promise.
The voters of District 15 have a lot of influence over statewide policy because that's a Republican-leaning district. As we know, Speaker Mattiello had a very narrow re-election victory over Republican challenger Stephen Fries in 2016, and I think his political outlook hinges in large degree on his following through on that promise to eliminate the car tax, and so far the governor seems on board with that.
And by the way, it's popular, right? I mean, I think, it's not just that the speaker wants the car tax plan, it's that if you go out and ask people whether they would like their car tax to be lower, they like that. And it almost might help to think about it, instead of one big car tax plan, as 6 smaller ones. Each year's phase out, taking another round of cars off the table. You're still in this second year affecting a lot of older cars, a lot of people with lower income, people who will really feel the benefit of losing that. Even Senate President Ruggiero talked to Kim Kalunian the other night for our preview, and he, who is not the big sponsor like the speaker, said right away, I'm glad we got rid of the car tax, or started getting rid of the car tax last year. That was a positive. People love it. So even the people who are supposedly the Senate, which is supposedly the skeptic on the car tax, comes right out and says this is great.
At the same time, there is a cost to it. It's easy for people who don't follow tax policy closely to forget that the state will have to come up with about $25 million each year to fully eliminate the tax.
So that's the question. So, okay, car tax is safe. We all can agree on that, but at what cost? One of the biggest costs in the budget are social programs. Are those on the table? Is that like sacred ground for lawmakers?
It's a good question because each year we've seen Governor Raimondo. That is the biggest chunk of the budget is in social services, especially the Medicaid program. And each year we've seen Governor Raimondo come in and offer a variety of different ways. Sometimes just straight rate cuts for the providers. Sometimes other tweaks that they say could save money. But the Assembly has been increasingly resistant to that. They hear from hospitals, they hear from nurses, they hear from nursing homes, they hear from home care workers. And I remember last year when Speaker Mattiello came out of a House Democratic caucus to talk about the budget, and we asked him, what did you hear? What did they say? He said, well, they all love the car tax. No surprise. And he said, and they're very concerned about any cuts to Medicaid, any impact on hospitals and nursing homes. So,
so what's left?
Well, it's getting harder and harder,
right.
I think, to find things, almost everything in the budget's there because someone likes it.
And you have the federal government looming over all of that, right? And what the Trump administration is going to do and the impact on our budget there. So, I mean, I know I'm not asking policymakers here when I ask that question, but what is left?
Well, we saw in the past year, I mean, there were, I don't know if the word is gimmicks, but there were a lot of kind of sleights of hand in terms of government policy to wipe out the deficit last year, and I think you raise a great question. Where will this money come from? Most of the budget is social services. There's a big chunk for education. I don't think there's political will to cut education, so it's the big question.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. This is my 10th year at the General Assembly, and I was walking in the other day thinking, I've never seen a good budget year. I've been here 10 years. This is the strongest economy we've seen. We've seen the unprecedented job growth nationally, and we're still in a bad budget year.
That's such an important point. It's as I've been attending hearings and listening, I have kept thinking to myself, if this is Rhode Island's difficult budget situation during a later part of an extended national economic recovery, what does Rhode Island's budget look like in a recession? Even a mild recession, let alone another bad recession like we had.
Well, and we're all in this snow globe of Rhode Island. Does any state have a good budget year? I mean, I don't know if any of us can answer that question.
Well, budget deficits are not unusual. States like Connecticut and New York have massive deficits right now. I mean, I can't personally remember the last time Rhode Island started a new legislative year without a deficit. It's been a really long time. But at the same time, we have seen the budget grow by a large amount of dollars, due in part to costs like Medicaid.
I remember a financial analyst for the legislature saying to me wistfully that this person remembered a time, I think in the 1990s, when there were surpluses projected, and the debate at the Assembly was how to spend the surpluses. I mean, it was before my time here, but it was talked about like the land of Oz, like so far from where we are now.
And John, you'll be watching how it gets done towards the end. There's always that last-minute cramming. It seemed better last year. You weren't out
yeah,
as
late
late
in the house.
but I'm sure that's something you'll be watching.
Yeah, and I'll be looking to see what the Speaker does. He made some promises after the session ended last year that he didn't want it to end the way it did, where it was at an impasse over the budget. We have yet to hear from him about how he's going to achieve that.
Well, actually, I spoke with him about that recently, and he said he would put systems in place to try and prevent that kind of budget standoff, but he's walked that back and said he's not going to publicly reveal what his approach will be. And at the same time, even if systems were in place, we really know that it's difficult to massage human nature among top lawmakers and completely avoid.
One thing that did very briefly, I know because we're up against the break, Speaker did say last year that he would not let sessions go all night, which historically they have. And if I remember, he stuck to that the whole year.
Sure did, 10 o'clock.
All right, we do have to go to a break. A lot more to talk about. Legalization of marijuana, is this the year? We also want to tackle the census. It's actually a very, very big deal. Stay with us. You're watching the Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. This week we are having a political roundtable focusing on the 2018 legislative session. We have John Marion, the Executive Director of Common Cause Rhode Island. Ian Donis, he's a political reporter for Rhode Island Public Radio. Ted, how are you?
Good.
Ted Nesi from WPRI.com. All right, let's talk about marijuana. Attorney General Jeff Sessions rescinded President Obama's directive this week that eased federal enforcement on marijuana. And it puts, I guess, federal crackdown on dispensaries on the table. Whether that happens or not remains to be seen, but I'm wondering if it has a chilling effect on the legalization of marijuana debate here in Rhode Island. What do you guys think?
Well, I'd say the legalization debate has already been pretty chilled. For years, Rhode Island has been on a list of states that are like next to legalize marijuana. And I think the people making those arguments have been a little bit too optimistic about it, because Governor Raimondo has been advocating a go-slow approach, expressing concern about children getting access to edible forms of marijuana and whatnot. And I think this is going to slow things down even more. But I think even without this, in an election year, lawmakers were very unlikely to legalize marijuana.
You talked about there being a lack of a champion besides the Pawtucket mayor for the Paw Sox. Is there a champion for the legalization of marijuana effort in an elected official right now? Can you point to anyone?
Not in the highest ranks. So, you need one of the big troika to be the champion. And I think when Governor Raimondo was elected, she had made some promises during the campaign. Unlike her predecessor, she was supportive, but she certainly hasn't been a champion. And neither of the leaders of the Assembly are champions. And without one of those three looking to do it, it's really difficult to make such a big policy change.
Yeah, and I think there's just nervousness around it. You can sense when you talk to the leaders about it, about the unknown, the questions they have about how it worked in Colorado. I feel like a couple of years ago, a lot of the talk was about revenue. Whenever there was a budget deficit situation, people would say, just legalize marijuana, you'll get the revenue. And now a big response to that you hear a lot is, well, you won't get that much revenue because you need to set up a regulatory framework, and there's costs to implementing that and treatments and things like that. So, never say never, certainly, and there's a study commission right now that's been set up by the legislature to look at this and deliver a report and give ideas. But even that commission appears somewhat balanced, pro and con, and that's definitely going to have different voices. So I don't know where it will end up.
One study commission that just shifting gears that just came out was on the governor's push to fix the state's crumbling schools, and the price tag on that is staggering. $2 billion, more than $2 billion, and that's with a B. And the commission, I believe, the task force, I should say, is recommending a $500 million bond to get it going. Is there going to be universal support for this initiative? Do you see any pushback in the General Assembly on getting this thing done?
Well, you will see people question whether the state can afford it with the deficits that we talked about earlier, but I spoke with Treasurer Magaziner about this recently. He says the state will be retiring about $1.4 billion in debt in the next coming years, and we've seen how Rhode Islanders, even with the shadow of 38 Studios, have generally been willing to support bond issues. I don't think anyone would dispute that children should be in safe, dry, comfortable schools. And advocates will also point to the bonus of getting construction jobs from this. So I would tend to think that people might be supportive of this.
It's just hard to see a lawmaker go against some solution to this, especially if in their community. I'm sure there are a lot of schools in good condition out there, but if the reports that we see are accurate, most of them aren't. So it'd be hard to see a lawmaker push against, hey, I'm against this, and then the people in their community go, wait a minute, we had an opportunity here?
And it's not like a toll, it's not a direct tax that people feel immediately. So obviously we pay in the end through the budget, but as Ian said, all these bond issues tend to sail through with high, vote totals when they get put on the ballot. So I don't see it being a problem. We'll know, in a couple of weeks, because she'll come out with, I think, her budget on the 16th or the 18th.
Yeah, that week. I'm interested to see how centrally the governor makes the push for the school rebuilding a part. If you think of last year's budget, Rhode Island's promise, the free college thing was it's by no means the only thing in the budget, but that was the big high-profile thing in the budget. The year before, even though it wasn't technically in the budget, truck tolls was really dominating the policy discussion. So does school rebuilding sort of take that top position this year? Is there something else coming? I think that's something to be watched. And then, I think there will be, as Ian alluded to, debate on the details when Patricia Morgan, the House Republican leader, is also running for governor, was on this show a couple weeks back. She said one push the Republicans in the House plan to make is to remove the prevailing wage rules on these projects so that they don't have to pay the highest level of wage to the construction workers and the laborers who work on this. Obviously, that seems unlikely in such a Democratic-dominated General Assembly with mayor, but that doesn't mean the Republicans won't push it, and make that part of the discussion.
And one thing we did learn from 38 Studios, I think, as you point out, the people of Rhode Island like a say in major bond proposals. All right, the other source of revenue that's possible, gambling. A lot of eyes are on the U.S. Supreme Court right now. They're deciding a case that's out of New Jersey on sports gambling there. We had Senate Finance Chairman William Conley on the show, who's also an attorney, and he said his take on that is he thinks the high court is going to favor the states. What does that mean? That means that states would have the option, if they wanted to do sports betting, and that would open the door to other sorts of betting, which would include online gambling. He was definitely open to it. The Senate president said he is open to gambling in the state. He's long time been an advocate of that, and I should say sports gambling. We have casinos here. Do you think this will be plug and play? Is this a top priority for the General Assembly?
Look, for the reasons we talked about in the first half, they really want revenue up there, right? It's always easier for them if there's less they have to cut or trim than if there's just some more money in the pot to paper over some of the troubles in the budget. I think, I will not claim expertise on this issue. Clearly it's something we're going to need to learn some more about if it's going to be a priority for them. But it was clear from Senator Conley's comments to us and in the Providence Journal that they've clearly spent some time thinking about this already. So it's maybe a higher priority than I would have guessed a month or two ago.
And go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, I would agree. The state is desperate for revenue, so I would expect the legislature to move quickly on this if the opportunity is there.
And the question is whether or not it would have to be brought to the voters in order to make that happen. Is that where we might see more of a pushback against gambling if it becomes that sort of an issue, and then you get both sides buying advertising and so on and so forth?
A decade ago we saw sort of the moral opposition to gambling manifest itself in a public vote. And I don't see that
Harris
moral
proposal, right?
opposition there anymore, or at least it's diminished. So we've now seen Twin River. They lost, a couple of years ago on sort of a local issue in Newport,
yeah.
But it wasn't necessarily the moral opposition to gambling argument, and I just don't see that coalition there anymore to rise up and say no, sports betting is
and if you look at public polling nationally, but I think Rhode Island seems to mirror this. You've seen this shift in the last decade and a half, where it appears a lot of people's views on social issues, many of them are getting more sort of libertarian. We saw same-sex marriage legalized in part of a sense of like, well, let them do what they want. Gambling, as John says, the opposition seems to have fallen. The marijuana discussion we were just having is partly sort of this feel of live and let live. We've seen Republican senators pushing pointing back at Attorney General Sessions on it, not just Democrats. So it may just be people don't have the same appetite for those kinds of fights or the same views on them that they did.
So we have a little over a minute left, so be brief here if you could. It's always hard to predict the surprises, and there always seems to be at least one surprise, at least at the end of the session. Ian, what are you looking for beneath the surface?
One thing I'm watching for is how many women candidates emerge as new lawmakers in the aftermath of the Me Too movement, and also what the relationship is like between Speaker Mattiello and Senate President Ruggiero. On the surface, it's specific, but there could be more to it than that.
Real quick, we have 30 seconds left. I wanted to ask you about the census, but I got to imagine that's the thing you are keeping your eye on right now.
Yeah, so Ted reported, we're likely to lose one of our congressional districts. Rhode Island is uniquely the only place they're going to test the census. So everyone in Providence County, so basically Cranston and North, is going to be asked about the census sometime in the next 3 months. So it's going to be on people's minds here in the next 3 months.
And it really is high stakes. You wrote an op-ed for the Providence Journal that talked a lot about that. I think it's a conversation we should have more, so we'd like to have you back to talk specifically about the census if you can do it. John Marion, Executive Director of Common Cause Rhode Island, Ian Donis, political reporter for Rhode Island Public Radio, and of course Ted Nesi from WPRI.com. I'm Tim White. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week on Newsmakers. Stay warm this weekend.